a lot of teachers who praise creativity and adaptability who, when faced with remote learning, are struggling to adapt and create new lesson plans for an online experience. The teachers who are leaning towards more of a do what I say, not what I do approach versus a lead by example approach are having a much harder time online. It's as if any teacher who hadn't been learning new skills as technology progressed is sort of being called out. Please like and subscribe to support the channel. Also, there are hyperlinks below. And here are some problems and solutions I've encountered while teaching and learning online. Number 1, update the lesson plan from the before. Lessons that refer to tour life, gigging tips, jam nights are all well and good, and if you have handouts of that stuff, absolutely still pass it out. But that's not really making the most of the moment. When recording, having your amp in an ISO booth or a live room and how to mic each situation is really cool and a nice conversation to have, but maybe at the moment purely hypothetical. One of the solutions I've seen to this has just been confronting what we can now. For instance, a really nice useful lesson has been how to best represent yourself on different social media platforms. Each one is a little different than the other. Say, Facebook might be for an older demographic, so if you play like smooth jazz, that could be your avenue. And Instagram would be kind of younger generation, maybe more neo-soul. Also, those two different demographics expect a lot of different things when it comes to your online presentation. Maybe the older generation on Facebook might not mind if there's kind of grainier footage, maybe the sound's not as good. They might be okay with it. Instagram might be the younger generation, which is expecting a higher production quality sound-wise and video-wise. Instead of a lesson based on having to be at a studio, why not a lesson on maximizing your home studio, given the space and tools that you have? Home studios and different social media platforms have been areas of interest for a long time, but not really taken seriously. The people who took to these areas of interest earlier on are having a much easier time adapting now. Really, these are just skills that will get more important over time. 2, no room for pretentiousness. Learning one-on-one with a teacher is a fantastic way of learning. I've loved my private lessons throughout my entire life, and it's a really great way to connect with someone who is able to see you're playing really up close and see it, literally, but also figuratively, and pick apart the idiosyncrasies of your playing. That doesn't really happen anymore, but the people who say that if you're not learning in person one-on-one, you might as well not have a lesson, that's ridiculous. I can bring up about 10,000 Instagram guitarists who've all learned from YouTube and other just online courses who are absolute beasts. They'll just have different strengths and weaknesses because of the way they were taught. Really, it's about combining the old one-on-one way with the online learning experience and making a much more cohesive, much more advanced lesson. How can we combine the two for an even more useful experience? There's no definitive, everyone agrees upon it answer, but there are people experimenting with it a lot, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. For people who had that old idea of, amp profilers or modelers or plugins just don't sound like the real amp turned up, it's not the same. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody has the time to care. This is not a big room. Do you think I'm putting a super reverb and a Friedman half stack in here, turning them up to the sweet spot just so I can get that good tone? Absolutely not. So why would I even care to think like that? A lack of understanding of profilers, plugins, modelers isn't helping anyone. The more that modern technology, which, like the social media platforms, have just been growing in popularity and use, are understood, the more we can all get an idea of the possibilities and drawbacks. Number 3, compassion and empathy are more useful now than ever. For a lot of people in the arts and in general, the power of positive thinking has been pushed pretty hard as this sort of cure-all for your problems. It's as if just being in a bad mood means you have a garbage, faulty mindset. If you're depressed chemically, that's one thing, but if you're depressed because things are depressing, that's about an understandable reaction. Someone saying, hey, you should be more positive because you're kind of a drag. That's like seeing someone with their pants on fire being like, hey, your pants are on fire. You should do something about that. I've had students who've had tough days when we've had a lesson, and I've had a tough day when I've had a lesson. And here are some ways that I've realized over time of how to deal with that. Number 1 would just be listening and reacting. Hey, that is crazy. Or I went through something similar. I totally get that situation. Just validating someone's experience so they don't feel alone with their struggle. Sometimes that's all people need. Number 2 would be the obvious one, which is if you see a solution or can think of a solution to their problem, absolutely work it out. If someone came to me and was like, hey, I'm afraid that my tone sucks so much that my guitar is unpleasant to listen to, which means I'll never be able to be a professional guitar player, especially remotely. So to me, that would be a pretty solvable solution, and I wouldn't even necessarily have to just solve it for the student and not have them think, but I could guide them down a path. Sometimes it's just like you're illuminating the path for them to figure things out on their own. This plugin's better for Americana, this one's better for metal. A path represents hope that the problem will be solved, which is great, especially considering that feeling of being trapped or not knowing what to do next is kind of at the base of so many problems. The last way would be distraction, which doesn't mean just talking about shows you've seen. It means medium-level, task-oriented testing. If there are no good answers to someone's issue, tasks can provide some temporary relief. For instance, I might be worrying about my future, and my teacher might not know what to tell me in that moment, but I do like writing out solos and recording solos with different guitars with different techniques in mind. There have been a handful of times this semester where I've gone into an assignment of writing a solo or soloing in a certain way, and I've started the assignment in a horrible mood. And by the end of the assignment, I kind of just forgot that I was in a horrible mood. It's like I was just tricked into the joy of making music that I would want to hear. What have your experiences been like teaching and learning and working remotely? What are some problems and solutions that you've dealt with? Please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them and I'd love to talk them out. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you guys next week.